Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, your mentor here at the Lorcana Tutor, and today we have part 2 in our Understanding the Inks, this little mini-series designed to help newer players understand what goes into the design and the play style of each one of the ink colors, so that way as you are starting you can have a better idea of maybe what inks call to you the most. Today we are going to be going over Amethyst. I will say this is one of my, or probably my favorite color in Lorcana, so I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible, but I love playing Amethyst. I think it's powerful and just really fun to play. One little tagline we can use here to understand the broad concept of Amethyst cards is otherworldly powers and arcane abilities. So we're going to have a lot of abilities on cards, a lot of things that, like, as you enter the battlefield, effects and all that kind of stuff. Now, Amethyst has 3 unique keywords that you will only see on these, or not only see on Amethyst cards, but they only get these 3 keywords. Rush, so being able to challenge a character the turn that it's played. Challenger, meaning whenever it does challenge, it gets a strength boost. And then Evasive, meaning only it can only be challenged by other evasive characters. So what we're going to do is kind of look through some of these things. So in Amethyst, one of the strongest and most defining parts of the Amethyst cards is what we call the Madame Mim bounce package with the Merlin goat. So we have these Merlin cards where they have an effect when they enter the battlefield and when they leave the battlefield. So we have the rabbit, which allows you to draw a card each time, the goat where you can gain 1 lore, and then the crab where you can give one of your other characters a challenger +3. And again, those both happen when you enter and when you leave the battlefield. Then we have these Madame Mim cards that say when you play this character, banish her or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. So this is, I think, designed to be a downside where you need to sacrifice your board control a little bit to play a one of these characters. Now, they are overstated, so they're supposed to be stronger than a typical card you would play at that point to pay for this downside, quote unquote. But when you pair it up with these Merlin cards, it has proved to be probably one of the strongest packages in Lorcana. All this came out in set 2, and it's been a staple of especially Amethyst decks moving forward. And pretty much all of the Amethyst decks that we're going to be looking at today are going to be based around this package. And if you imagine, so it's pretty typical to play 4 snakes, 4 foxes, 4 rabbits, and 4 goats. That's 16 of your 60 cards, so we're already at like a quarter of your cards here, and we're going to look at some other cards in Amethyst that are pretty much staples. Like if you're playing Amethyst, you're playing these cards. So one of the things as we get towards the end that we're going to look at is a lot of these lists may look kind of similar as far as the cards that we're playing on the Amethyst side, which some people might view as a downside, that it's you don't have as much variety if you're looking to play at a more like competitive level. Obviously, if you're playing for fun or casual, then you can play whatever you want. But these cards are some of the strongest Amethyst cards, and a lot of decks are built around this package and being able to utilize it to the best effect. Another thing that Amethyst does really, really well is just unconditional card draw. So from set 1, we got this song Friends on the Other Side that costs 3, but you can sing it and you can draw 2 cards. Another thing from set 1 was the Maleficent, where when you play it, you draw a card. We already talked about the rabbit. You get a card whenever it enters and leaves play. We have a couple of these 1-drops that are slightly conditional card draw, but pretty much you can banish the characters. This one, the Chernabog's Follower, whenever a quest, the Broom, whenever you play another character to draw a card. They are, again, in most Amethyst decks, you're playing 4 of both of these as your 1-drops that are probably some of the strongest 1-drops in the game for the card draw. And then another card that we have is this Cusco, which is 2 costs, and whenever it's banished, you may draw a card. In most card games, drawing cards is one of the strongest things you can do. I think in Lorcana, it's the same thing as well. And it's one of the things that makes Amethyst such a strong color is the ability to just have a lot of cards that you can draw, build up a big hand, and so much of it you are very unconditional. You can just play a card and draw more cards. So I think a very defining thing about Amethyst is the ability to draw a lot of cards. Now we're going to look at some of the cards that highlight the keywords that are unique to Amethyst. So we have our Rush characters. The most common one, again, being this Madame Mim Fox. In set 1, we saw this Rafiki played a little bit, not as much anymore. A new card that's been introduced in set 5 is this Elsa, where it has both rush and evasive, and the ability to exert a chosen opposing character, which we'll look at a little bit later more. We have Cogsworth, where you play it, you can give any one of your characters rush. And then we have Peter Pan Shadow that gives all of your rush characters evasive. This is a card that you'll see sometimes as like a tech option. It was used a little bit to help play against Diablo, or back in like set 2 when Minnie Mouse Surfer was a problem, you would play this and be able to give, your Madam Mim Fox evasive and all of that kind of stuff. But what we'll see here, and kind of when we get back to like the otherworld abilities, is this Cogsworth, when you're pairing it with the Madam Mim Fox or any of the Madam Mims, being able to play this, give a character rush, and then bounce it back to your hand or return it back to your hand so you have that effect again, just becomes really strong, and a lot of these cards synergize together in this way. And it's really fun to play. It can be really, really strong, and one of the reasons why I love Amethyst so much. We have some of these evasive characters. A lot of them, it's more so not that you get like payoffs for having evasive characters, but some of the characters in Amethyst just have evasive tagged on to what they're doing. So like we have this 1-drop Pascal that says when you have another character in play, this character gains evasive. This is a pretty strong, like aggressive card, because you're trying to get as many creatures out on the board. If it has evasive, it's free to quest for a good amount of turns, and just being a 1/1 that quests for 1, usually it's a lower priority, but you're able to get a lot of lore with it. We see another Madam Mim that has the same ability, but you have to return 2 chosen characters back to your hand, but it's a really, really big body. It has evasive 5/7, quest for 4. Not seen as much play as some of like the cheaper options, but you do see it as maybe like a one-of in some decks for a little bit of spice. We have this Isabella Madrigal that has evasive, and if you don't quest with anything else, you can quest for 4 with it. Hasn't seen as much play, but just kind of a fun card that was experimented with. And then we had the Peter Pan Shadow. Here we have Peter Pan Shadow Finder. So it has rush and evasive, and it gives all of your evasive characters rush. So kind of like the inverse of what the other card was doing. So again, it's a cool little symmetry that we see in those cards. And they're both experimented with and maybe used as like a one-of to tech for certain things that are going on in the meta at that point. And then we have the last keyword is the Challenger. So we talked about the Crab. This is, I think, the most common use of using Challenger and Amethyst. Again, the ability to bounce it, play it. A really common line is going to be to play Merlin Crab, play your Fox. When it leaves the battlefield, you can give the Fox the Challenger +3, so you have a character with 7 strength that has rush, so it's really easy to kind of deal with that. A more defensive option as a 1-drop is this Rafiki Mystical Fighter. It has a Challenger +3, so it can really trade up to, take out a Mr. Smee, take out anything, an Aerial Singer, something that has 3 strength. A card that, again, it got experimented with was this Hypnotic Strength, so it's a 2-cost action. You get to draw a card, and you give a Challenger +2 this turn. With the rise of Daisy Duck, there was maybe looking at this as kind of being an option to deal with that. It's fallen out of favor, but just kind of seeing more instances of Challenger is good. And then this was a set 1 card that saw a little bit of play. It's a Zeus, God of Lightning. It has a rush and a Challenger. So you're seeing how some of these keywords are just being thrown on there. Not as many like win conditions, but just a part of the identity of Amethyst. Now, another like mechanical design that Amethyst has is the ability to exert opposing characters. So Amethyst on itself doesn't have that much like removal of like, oh, get rid of this character, return this character back to your hand. But what they do have, and where it pairs up with like your rush and your Challenger, is the ability to exert chosen opposing characters. So, for example, in set 1, one of the strongest cards that Amethyst had was this Elsa, where when you play it, you can exert up to 2 chosen characters, and they can't ready at the start of their next turn. So you could either try to take them out, or you can just leave them be, and you give yourself an extra turn to, maybe quest and win the game, or just set up more board presence to try to take them out. In set 2, we were introduced to this Pinocchio, which gives the ability to exert 1 chosen opposing character. It's at a cheaper cost. And again, when you start to pair this up with some of like the Madam Mim, especially the Madam Mim Fox, being able to play Madam Mim Fox, you're getting this exert effect in your hand, and your opponent now has to be like, okay, like whatever I put down, they can just exert and challenge if they have the board. So Again, it can be really, really strong. It's a little weak to ward characters because you can't challenge or you can't choose them. But this is Amethyst's like form of removal, so it's not like super strong, but it is a tool that they have. We have this Ursula Sea Witch Queen, and whenever a quest, you get to exert the chosen character, and it also has a little ability that other characters can't exert to sing songs. I think that's more flavorful than anything. It's not necessarily like an Amethyst trait, but just more, the Ursula taking Ariel's voice, stopping her from singing, very flavorful. And then we already looked at this Elsa, the fifth spirit, that has the rush, that has the evasive, and it has the ability to exert a character when it's played. So it kind of has a bunch of the Amethyst traits all in one character. This is seeing a good amount of play in a bunch of decks. I'll kind of show you some deck lists later on. You'll see this Elsa present in a good amount of them. And then one last kind of defining thing, I think, with the Amethyst is the ability to, again, unconditionally just gain lore. So we looked at the GOAT where you when he plays and when he leaves play, you gain one lore. This is a lot of Amethyst decks like Closer, so trying to just slowly chip away and get up to maybe like 12 or 13, and then start bouncing your goats. If you get them back into your hand, most decks don't really have a way to deal with that. So that's like a really strong tool to have. We have things like Sorcerer's Spellbook, where it's an item where then you can just pay one to gain a lore each turn. Another card that has like a deck built around it is this Legendary Jafar, and it says whenever you draw a card, you get to gain one lore. So the idea behind this deck is to play a bunch of Jafars, shift it on turn 5. It can sing a whole new world in steel, so then you would just gain 7 cards and gain 7 lore right off the bat. A newer card that was introduced in Shimmering Skies is this Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, where you just pay 2 to gain 2 lore. Really, this has been mainly used in like a very aggressive deck to just kind of close the gap, but I've seen some other decks use it just as like a couple of, just to try to get over the finish line, where maybe some decks are good at getting to like 16 or 18 or something like that, but then having these to just try to like close out the game against some slower decks that can control the board more as the later turns get going on. And then the last card we're looking at here is the Boss is on a roll. You can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, switch the order of them, and then you just gain a lore. So we do see this theme of just being able to gain lore for free without questing. Again, I would say that that's another Amethyst trait, but I think more and more colors are starting to see different ways that you can gain lore by meeting certain conditions. So with this kind of being the framework of Amethyst cards, let's look at a couple of deck lists here. So this is I think probably the most common version of Amethyst, and it's Amethyst Ruby. So the idea here is that you draw a bunch of cards, and then you use the strong control powers of Ruby to get to later on in the game to play your Medusas, to play your Tremaines, to try to control the board. You have Be Prepared if things get out of control. Another thing that I didn't really talk about here are Amethyst has probably the strongest locations, the main one being this Queen's Castle. So it has 7 willpower. You get 2 lore at each turn, and whenever there's a character here, it draws you cards. And then the library being a card that whenever a character is banished while at the library, it draws you cards. So again, we see the Amethyst of, okay, we're going to get lore, we're going to draw cards. That's super strong. So this deck just wants to draw cards, get to the later game, and then, control the board with the Tremaines, the Be Prepared, Maui. And it has some of the earlier aggressive of like the Flynn Rider, where if you have the highest strength character on the board at the beginning of your turn, you gain 3 lore. So you're seeing some of this lore generation out of nowhere. And then as the game gets on, you close it with the GOAT bounce effects and all that stuff. So probably the quintessential Amethyst deck, in my opinion. It's been around since set 1. It's always been strong. The combination of card draw and removal, I think, is just an inherent, very strong combination, and it will probably be a deck that will be around for forever. The next color pair we see here is Amethyst Emerald. Now, like I was saying earlier, we're going to see a lot of the Amethyst cards just being the same. We're going to see the Madame Mim Fox. We pair it with friends on the other side. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 20 cards. That's like a third of your deck that's going to be the same. We're seeing some things of Merlin Crab. But in here, we're seeing some more of the Elsas. We're seeing this Ursula here. Really, the reason we see the Ursula in this deck and not in the other ones is because Emerald has the ability of playing this Ursula 2-drop, which is very strong. So you we'll play it to discard an opponent's songs. And then with a lot of the Emerald cards, you're using, you have Clarabelle as an extra draw engine. You have the Merfolk as an aggressive quester at the beginning. And that's really the idea behind this deck. A little more aggressive focused-ish, but you know, you'll see a lot of these Amethyst cards are very synonymous with what we see in the other ones. Now, those I would say are probably two of the most popular Amethyst decks, but we're going to look at a couple of others. I think one of the nice things about Amethyst is that there's like a viable list with each color. So this is one of the decks that I've been playing the most this set, and I've had a lot of fun with it. Again, the purple package is going to be almost identical. We're running the 1-drops. We have the Madame Mim Merlin package. You have your friends, you have your castles. We're having some of these Elsas to deal with the board, and then here we're dealing with the crab. In the steel, what we get are some of these beefy characters that can quest for a lot. So the Smee at the early game can be really tough to deal with, and will get you 2 to 4 lore pretty easily. The Lawrence, same thing. For certain decks, can be really tough to deal with. The ability to play either a rabbit or a goat on turn 4 and then have it sing Zeus is very, very strong. We got big bodies like Chen Po, Tinkerbell to help control the board a little bit later, some more of the steel removal, and then we have this Pete, which we can start to abuse more with, again, our bounce package. So we play it down, they can't do an action next turn. You know, if you're at 5 ink, you can do a Snake and a Pete, and you can just kind of lock them out from playing action. So I've had a lot of fun playing this. I don't think it's quite at the level of the other 2 decks that we were looking at, but I think what we start to see with Amethyst is that it's strongest when paired with removal colors. It's more of a supportive color, I think, than necessarily like a control color or anything that helps deal with the board inherently. The next card is Amethyst Sapphire, what people call Blurple. This deck is mostly comprised of our purple cards, but with blue we get the ability to get more like ink into your inkwell. So we have the Tipo, which is going to get you an extra ink on turn 2. You get the Mickey, which is going to get you an extra one on turn 3, and you have the Donald, which is going to get you there. So we're trying to get to the later game faster. We're trying to get to some of our bigger cards. So in here we're also running some of these Ursulas. We don't have a shift drop, but the ability to get more ink faster makes this a little bit more viable of a play. We're having the big Elsa paired up with the like Rush Evasive Elsa. This is the big Elsa is really kind of the main win condition of this deck, of trying to be able to, you know, exert and tap down some of your opponent's characters, make it so that they can't ready at the start of their turn. And then again, with the snakes, you can just bring it back to your hand and replay it. So the versatility of the Madame Mims is very, very strong, especially with any characters that have like an enter play effect. And then we have this Hades, which helps with a little bit of removal. It puts a character into your opponent's inkwell, but you get to get rid of one of those characters. And then the last deck is a little bit different. If you've seen the Amber video, you saw this deck. This is just the hyper aggro deck where you're pairing it mainly up with the Amber aggressive characters. We do have some of the 1-drops for the card draw. We have the Pascal in there to gain a bunch of extra lore. Amethyst does have its own 1-drop that quests for 2, so that's definitely in there. And then just some of this free lore gain, the ability to draw cards at a cheap rate, but your opponent gets to draw one as well. You don't matter too much in this hyper aggro deck because you're just trying to win as fast as possible. But that was all 5 colors, and all these decks I think are viable at a certain level. You can definitely go down to your locals and play them. This deck here was from someone that made to day 2 in Las Vegas challenge, so the deck has legs. You can go and take it to its tournament if you learn how to play it properly and potentially make day 2. So for all those reasons, I think that Amethyst is probably one of the strongest colors in Lorcana, especially when you pair it up with more of a more removal color. Some of the strongest things about Amethyst is the fact that you just get all these cards, and that is a really good thing in any trading card game. It just gives your deck a lot more consistency, and I think that it's great for newer players because it allows you to see more of your deck, get more of your outs on a consistent basis. It's much more consistent. You're going to have less games where you're going to, be uninkable locked or anything like that. You're just going to be able to smooth it out. Being able to draw more cards is really, really strong. as you see, the Merlin and the Madame Mim package, I think, is one of the strongest things in Lorcana, and it's really one of the main selling points of going to Amethyst, and we have some of the strongest locations here. Some of the cons with Amethyst are that it lacks any hard removal, so really you need to pair it up with something like Ruby Amethyst, which, again, in the past, we've talked about maybe Amethyst Amber being a strong or a good beginner deck because it has a very linear game plan that you don't really need to think about too much of what your opponent is doing. If you're looking for the next step, I might recommend doing Ruby Amethyst because, like we talked about, you get more of the card draw, so it's a little bit more smoothed out, but you have some of these big removals that can bail you out in a bad position. And then I think a con of the whole like deck building is just that we saw a lot of the purple cards are pretty much the same. So you're taking that same core and then you're just pairing it up with other colors, which some people might find not as exciting, but I think it's just showing the testament of how strong the Merlin and Min package is, and when you're in those colors, if you want to build a strong deck, you kind of got to be playing those. But thank you so much for watching, and if you get to this point, I really, really appreciate it. If you enjoy the video, please give it a like, leave a comment, let me know what your favorite Amethyst card is, and make sure you keep your eye out for the next video. Emerald should be coming out in the next couple of days. Thank you so much.